Welcome to Before You Were Born, the tale of our Earth's glorious history. What we do in this show is we go back in time and look at the history of the events that happened this week. It's very exciting.
It's very exciting. Look, there's a lot of exciting stuff that happened this week in history. There's a lot of mundane stuff.
We don't touch
to the wayside.
We leave
but
that.
Harry, hi, you're Harry. I'm Nash. Welcome to Before You Were Born.
Thanks for introducing me.
You're welcome.
I know me.
Now, dude, I'm very excited to be exploring our topics this week. I know you've got something very exciting, but I'm actually exploring something a little bit confusing.
Okay. Maybe we should tell everyone what week this is.
Oh, yeah, of course.
This
Sorry.
is, of course, the 10th of April to the 16th of April. That's our week in history.
Big week in history.
Nash, what do you have in store?
Okay, well, for me, on the 16th of April, 1977, a guy called Steve launches a product, right? It's been patented under the title of a microcomputer with a video display, right?
I've never heard of a thing like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Steves in history. Are you going to tell me more, or do I have to listen?
Look, the big question here is that this event raises a big question.
Okay.
And the question is whether technology moves society forward or whether society moves technology forward.
Oh, it's definitely society moves technology forward.
Definitely.
No, I take it back. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to listen to your
Very
segment
certain
to
there.
find out.
Okay, what are you exploring?
April 11th, 1970. Apollo 13, its launch from Cape Canaveral. Very exciting, right?
Yeah.
Houston,
Yeah.
we have a problem.
Oh, wait.
That's the one. That is the one. Now, we have on the show today
Yeah.
the first person to hear that saying.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yep, he was a NASA employee, Mike Dinn, and he was deputy station manager
Right.
at Honeysuckle Creek. What is that?
Oh, dude.
Stay
I know
tuned and you'll find out. Thanks for joining us on Before You Were Born. But before we can start, there's one thing we have to do.
Cue the intro.
I have a dream.
Good evening and welcome to television.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Let's go back to a time before you were born. Welcome back to Before You Were Born, the history show that talks about this week in history.
I thought you were about to say history, like the history show that talks about history.
Yeah, I mean, we do that as well. Now, we're speaking about Apollo 13,
Yeah.
the 11th of April, 1970.
Yeah.
And it's a big date because this is when the 13th Apollo spaceship is launched into the air. Of course, Apollo 11 was when they landed on the moon. Very exciting stuff. You know, Neil Armstrong. Actually, in our intro is old
Yeah,
Neil.
is his voice, yeah.
Yeah, which is quite cool. Now, Apollo 13, it doesn't go to plan. It's not great.
Doesn't it explode?
It does explode.
Yeah.
One of the oxygen tanks, it explodes about 55 hours into the flight. So they've now lost energy, water, limited oxygen, and also a lot of their food supplies.
Yeah, right. I understand that food and oxygen and water are pretty crucial to sustaining
They're
life.
pretty important.
Yeah.
But thankfully, this ship is actually a two-part ship.
Okay.
So they've got the landing module
Yeah.
and then the flying bit, I guess.
Okay.
So they go into the Aquarius, which is the landing module.
Yeah.
And that's where they have a bit of energy and, you know, the functions that they need.
So some of the systems are online in the Aquarius.
Yeah, it
Right.
does work. But they've got to conserve
Age
it.
of Aquarius.
Yeah, I mean, that too.
70s.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's the right time. So then it gets to the issue of they've got a big problem here. They're not going to make it to the moon.
Yeah, right.
So they get onto the phone. They go, Houston, we've got a problem.
Was that mission?
Yep.
Oh.
Tom Hanks said it in 1970 and then again in 1995 for the movie.
Wow.
I'm
He's
kidding.
a great man, that Tom
He
Hanks.
wasn't an astronaut. But that line is so important because
Yeah, right.
that notified people down on Earth there was a problem.
Well, who was the first people that they notified?
Well, you'd think it'd be Houston, Texas, which was the headquarters
Yeah, right.
of Apollo 13 and the Apollo missions. You think it wasn't. Just to clarify, before I move on, it wasn't.
Okay.
It definitely wasn't.
All right, yeah, okay.
Next place, Cape Canaveral, where of course NASA is based.
Okay.
Also not there.
Where they launched from as well?
It is where it was launched from.
Yeah.
It was actually sent to a little known place called Honeysuckle Creek. Ever heard of it?
Yes, I have actually.
Why have you heard of it, Nash?
Because I grew up next door to it.
That's right.
It's right near God's country, Canberra, the
It
greatest
is-
city in the world.
It's a tracking station in Canberra that is a lot closer than you would think in America. The heritage-listed Honeysuckle Creek was a NASA tracking station, and it was vital to relaying communications and also images from the Apollo missions to the American NASA outfits.
Oh, so it was up to them to Photoshop out the strings and the back of the studio to broadcast out to the public for the movie, was it?
Yeah, it wasn't actually made in a Hollywood basement. It was Honeysuckle Creek that helped it all happen. But no, it was huge. It was the first place to relay the images of man landing on the moon.
That's
and
amazing.
Of course, hearing that famous line, Houston,
We have a problem.
we've had a problem.
Right.
On the line, we have a very, very special guest, the Deputy Director of Honeysuckle Creek Training Station during the Apollo mission 7 to 14. Mike Din, how are you going today?
Oh, good, thanks. Good. Here I'm in Canberra.
Thank you much for joining us on Before You Were Born. Let's get straight into it.
Now, Mike, just quickly, I'd just like to say, as a fellow Canberran, I'm so very proud to be speaking to you this afternoon. Now, I understand that operations at Honeysuckle Creek were vital to relaying information to NASA from the Apollo 13 mission. But could you just describe quickly for us, how did that communications process work?
Yes, you're quite right. There were 3 main tracking stations around the world provided communications to all the Apollo missions, of which Honeysuckle Creek near Canberra was one of them. We had a big dish, an 26-metre big dish, which, by the way, is still visible at Tidbinbilla near Canberra. We sent signals up to the spacecraft and down from the spacecraft, both the command module and the lunar module. We received all those signals from all those Apollo missions, including Apollos 11 and 13.
Yeah, which of course were the most vital, I guess, of the two, with the Apollo 11 being first man on the moon.
Of course.
It's not quite as it appeared in the movie The Dish, which is about Parkes, and that's about 90% accurate, but the actual first pictures did originate from Honeysuckle. Not that it mattered at the time. I mean, our priority was to get the best signal from the best spacecraft to the right place, and
of course.
It's only years after that you get into these debates.
Yeah, how do you feel being one of the first people in the entire world to see man on the moon? How was that feeling for you?
Well, at the time, of course, it's a bit like being an actor in a play. You're concentrating on your own part, so you don't see the whole play. It's only years later that you can see where you're fitted into that play. But yes, it was the highlight of my career. Was the very first pictures from Apollo 11. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, of course, you saw the first images. What do you say to people that perhaps don't believe that the moon landing actually happened?
Well, they would have had to have worked a great hoax on people like ourselves who were actually pointing an antenna at the moon at the time. Yeah. And to me, the biggest thing about the hoaxing is well, if you're going to hoax it, why would you do it more than once? You'd be an idiot to try and do it again. So it's good for a bit of fun and debate, and there's still a few people, not many left now, I think, who think it was all a hoax.
Yeah, which I think is good. Now let's move on to, of course, Apollo 13, which is what we're focusing on this week on Before You Were Born. You mentioned in the past that Apollo 13 used about 95% of the support capability of the Honeysuckle Creek station and their backups. What was your role and the role of Honeysuckle Creek during this very tense mission?
Well, we happened to just be acquiring the spacecraft just as the explosion occurred. I was just getting ready to move into my position of running the operations at the station, and I heard in the background, Houston, we've had a problem. And so we were the major station in trying to keep communications with them, during the next several hours. And when I say that we had to use a lot of our capabilities, on a normal mission with everything working fine, we all knew exactly what needed to be done, and the equipment more or less worked itself.
Okay.
But on Apollo 13, it was very difficult because the third stage of the Saturn rocket was following the same trajectory as the lunar module, and they both happened to be on the same radio frequency. And we had significant problems in separating the frequencies from each other. But we succeeded. We'd done a lot of training, and I'd thought about this possibility before the mission happened. Yeah. And so we weren't really phased. We did cope.
That's good, because you guys, of course, were very pivotal in providing that communication between, the astronauts and Houston's main base.
That's right. And they went into the lunar module as a rescue craft, and it really did stretch the capabilities of everybody in our station and around the world and at Houston and on board the spacecraft. And the Apollo 13 movie is very good and very very real to life.
Yeah, which is great. Now, I've just got to ask, when you heard Houston, we've had a problem, did it send shiver down your spine? Because when I hear it, it sends a shiver down mine.
No, it didn't particularly bother me. I guess we're 50 years younger. You take things in your stride, and certainly during the manned flights of the moon, we just took everything in our stride.
Right. Well, Mike, arguably there were some moments that were very tense. I mean, from what I understand, there was a large break in radio silence after they passed the tracking station. But, sorry, go ahead.
Very true. We were the last station to be tracking Apollo 13 when it came back from the moon's vicinity, and it flew right across Australia, heading towards a splashdown in the Pacific. And as it got nearer and nearer to the Earth, it got faster and faster. And we tracked it right to the horizon. And then it went into this communication blackout, and we didn't hear anything for quite a long time. And that was a great concern. Yeah. And so the fellow, my boss, Tom Reed at the station, rang his wife at home, says, well, we might as well come home. We don't know what's happened. And she says, oh, I'm watching them on the parachutes now on the television.
So ironically,
we were at the tracking station and no one had told us anything about that. They couldn't receive television out there. Still couldn't today. So
that must have been a massive sign.
Very, very happy about that.
Wow.
It's quite funny to think that you guys kind of were one of the last to know that it had survived, and yet you were also the ones tracking the rocket.
That's true, because once it had left our view and got into the splashdown area, then it moved into the regime of the U.S. Navy to do the tracking. That wasn't fed out onto our circuits and back to us, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter, but it would have been nice if someone had kept us apprised of what was occurring.
Yeah. just one phone call would have helped, saying, yep, they survived, you guys did a great job, and end of story.
Thank you. Yes, it was. Mike, it was very great fun, very challenging.
Thank you very much, Mike Dinh, for joining us on Before You Were Born, and thank you for helping make sure Apollo 13 got home safely.
All right. All the best. Cheers.
See you later.
Bye. Welcome back to Before You Were Born. Harry and Nash with you here. Harry, dude, I really enjoyed that chat with Mike Dinh. Such a fascinating guy. Of course, the Deputy Director of the Honeysuckle Space Centre.
He's the first man to see pictures of man on the moon and hear that famous line, Houston, we've had a problem.
Very, very cool stuff indeed. Now, Harry, I have a slightly abstract one for you this week.
Okay, tell me.
If we go back in time, if we go back to April 11, 1977, a guy called Steve lodges a patent for a microcomputer with video display.
Now, is this Steve the pirate from Dodgeball, the true underdog story?
Close, but not quite.
Okay.
So then, on April 16, 1977, another guy called Steve,
a lot of Steves,
launches this same microcomputer for use with video display at an event called West Coast Computer Fair. And this Steve calls it the Apple II.
I know these Steves. Is it Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs?
Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, yes, the co-founders of Apple Computers, of course.
Cool.
The multinational, global empire now that we all know and love.
It's pretty big.
It's pretty
It's
huge,
up there with
right?
Google.
So this was their this was their baby, right? This was their product that took them to market and made them the success that they were. Apple II, not Apple I. Apple I was more of a hobbyist machine, right?
Okay.
It was it had 4 kilobytes of RAM. No, 4 bytes of RAM. Not even kilobyte.
Killer.
4 bytes, I'm pretty sure.
That is, so obviously a kilobyte is 1,000 of the bytes.
Yeah, one of the smallest units of memory you can have. Yeah.
That is not a lot at all.
Super small. I may have got that wrong, and there's bound to be some tech people out there who are going to hound me in the comments.
They'll be like, Nash,
that's okay.
you're incorrect.
The point is
4.2.
The point is, though, is that it had next to no processing power. But anyway, so the point is, it didn't have much power by today's standards, much processing power, but by then those standards, it was quite powerful. An interesting thing about the Apple I as well, they sold it for $666.66.
Oh, that's creepy.
A lot of conspiracy theorists getting up and around that business. Apparently, it's because Steve Wozniak just liked recurring numbers.
Okay.
So, anyway, I digress.
Not that he's the devil. Okay,
no.
Fair enough.
Apple II, right? So this is the great big computer that is recognizable as one of the most influential personal computing devices in the late 70s and early 80s. Okay?
Kind of a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's used across education. There's lots of high schools that have Apple IIs. Business, it's really big as well. And it's also the first personal computer that has a color display as well. The very
shiny.
first one. Now, here's another thing as well. This is at the forefront of personal computing. This Apple II was one of the first widely adopted personal computers.
That's true.
You and I, we have grown up in a time, we're both born in 93, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've both grown up at a time where that was the norm. And it's profoundly changed the way that society works and the way that we do business and we educate ourselves and we entertain ourselves. Computers are a huge part of our lives.
It's changed absolutely everything.
Well, here's the question, is whether or not computers themselves, whether the technology has influenced society or whether society influences the technology. So,
Big question.
It's a big question, right? So what do you reckon? Because I feel like that's the question that this event raises.
Yeah, it does.
Does technology influence society or does society influence technology? Or is that even the right question to ask in the first place?
I think it is the right question. I think the answer is that society influences technology. It is us as humans that make these changes. We make Apple II because we want technology to evolve. We are the driving force behind technology. Without humans, there is no technology.
Okay, so you're saying the precondition to having any sort of non-biological intelligence or machines is humans.
Yes, that's right, Nash.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to take you back to the 1800s, the 1870 in fact. Now, that's when a little guy called Thomas Edison, you may have heard of him before.
Yeah, he often gives me light bulbs.
Great ideas, yeah.
Yep.
So Thomas Edison, back in 1870, he invented this thing called the phonograph.
Okay.
Any idea what the phonograph might be?
No idea.
Okay, so the phonograph was this, so essentially this foil cylinder that was built around this apparatus and it was used to record and play back sound. It was the first audio capture and playback device.
Recorder.
Crucially, it recorded and it played it back on the same thing, right?
That's a lot in one go.
It was pretty cool. Now, Edison's initial thoughts for the phonograph, he thought the phonograph was going to revolutionize a whole bunch of areas. He thought that it was going to be for audiobooks for the blind. It would be able to create clocks that would announce the time. It would be used for music. But he really thought the biggest use for the phonograph would be for letter writing and dictation. Okay?
Okay.
Now, what's interesting, I think, is that none of those things really took off. It was music that was the big thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Now in the 1890s, this guy called Emil Berliner, right? He prompted the shift from these foil cylinders to wax discs, which produced a higher fidelity sound for the audio recording, but it meant. Oh, no, it's not vinyl. Oh, well, sort of, yeah, kind of like vinyls. Yeah, that's right. So it produced a high fidelity sound, but it limited the recording capability. So
right.
your average person at home couldn't go around recording stuff on a wax disc easily. Okay, what did this do? The introduction of a personal music player in the 1800s, the 1890s. Well, it upset the creation, the distribution, and the consumption of music. It totally upended it.
True.
Okay, so prior to the being able to record music and listen to it personally, you had to listen to music being played live. I mean, when was the last time you saw a live band? Or rather, what do you do more often? Do you see live music or do you listen to music personally?
I listen to music personally.
Okay, and was that
expensive.
a result of the technology or was that a result of society telling you to do that?
Society.
Really? Society?
No, it was technology, but I didn't want you to be right.
Okay, all right. So here we go. So we're seeing that maybe technology has some influence on the way in which we live our lives and society is shaped. So yeah, the introduction of the phonograph, it meant that people could listen to music and a much broader array of music in their own homes for the first time. And
But can I just say though?
Yeah.
I think society still shapes how we listen to music.
Oh yeah, of
Society
course.
was like, we want to consume more often, all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's why they made it like this.
Definitely, 100%. And then, I mean, so people were listening to more music, and this actually affected music itself, okay? Because the musicians who wanted to sell records, right, their music needed to be around 3 minutes to 4 minutes long, the average length of a disc, okay? And it had to conform to the market forces of a music economy, this new music industry that had never existed before.
So it's because of the size of the disc that songs are now 3 to 4 minutes. Is that what you're saying?
I think that had a large part to do with it.
That's
yes.
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy. Like, I don't like songs that are more than 4 minutes. I'm like, oh, it's too long.
But
it's like an odyssey.
But would that be fair to say that's an example of technology affecting society?
Yeah.
Now,
right.
You know, here's the other thing as well. I'm going to say that you're right, 100%. Society does affect technology as well. Because, I mean, was it the case that the phonograph needed to have the recording capability? No, it didn't. People didn't want to have that. They didn't need it. So why bother? That was a feature that was dropped from the technology. So I think if you look at this play out across time, we go fast forward right now to today where we have iPods, iPhones, our phones, whatever, right?
The whole shebang.
The whole shebang-a-bang. Our consumption habits, the way that we interact with technology and the way it interacts with us, it probably doesn't make sense to say it's society to technology or technology to society. It's got to be this feedback loop. It goes back on itself.
It's like the chicken and the egg. What came first? You don't know. Could be either. This is the same thing. It's very much a chicken and the egg case.
So very much so. And I think it's really interesting to explore these feedback loops of what influences what. And maybe it's a bit more sophisticated model of exploring, history in general. You know, does human evolution perpetuate technology, or does technology perpetuate human evolution? Are we moving towards this sort of Ray Kurzweil singularity where we merge finally with technology? Oh man, Harry, I can't wait.
You know what, Nash? I think that's kind of what this show's all about.
The singularity?
Giving you no answers whatsoever, and just giving you more questions. It's what we do.
That's what I want to do, man. Look, I've got no answers. No answers at all.
No, we have none. But, it's a good thing Apple was invented, because I'm very happy with the way technology is at the moment, but maybe not chips in our heads just yet.
Maybe not just yet. But actually, would you do it? Would you do that? Would you be down for that? Or,
no.
If not on your head, maybe like a thing in your arm that you could just pay for everything with like a paywave you built into your arm.
The only thing the only thing I'd have in my arm is probably strobe lights. Party all the time.
You want some neons? Like you get pulled over by the cops and like, sorry mate, you can't have those, sorry. There's no regulation. So Harry, we've got some fast facts coming up right after this.
Welcome back to Before You Were Born, a show that really goes into the history of our planet. Now, this week, of course, is the 10th to the 16th of April, and a lot has happened. We've covered quite big things as well. Of course, spoke to Mike Din about Apollo 13, and
we dug into whether or not society shapes technology or vice versa.
All because of Apple II.
Apple II.
But now, let's head to one of our favorite segments, Fast Facts. All right, 11th of April. Let's start off. Nothing interesting happens on the 10th. No offense, 10th of April. But 11th of April, 1979. Idi Amin is overthrown. Any idea who he is?
He was a bad man.
He was a dictator in Uganda. He overthrew the government in 1971 and then was overthrown himself. Ironically, was known as the last king of Scotland.
Yeah, I never understood that. Why is that?
I can tell you, because this is his quote. If you go to Scotland, you will talk to the people. They will welcome you to their house. With the English, if they see a black man, they say he is a monkey or dog. Kind of fair why he liked the Scots better than the Brits.
Yeah,
and he actually worked with a lot of Scottish people in the army, which is also how he came to fall in love with the name, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. But yeah, he's overthrown. He's out. Nash, what happens on the 12th?
All right, on the 12th of April, 1961, the first man entered into space. Here's a question. Was he American or not?
He was not American. Of course, a space race was happening then.
Yeah. So it was a guy called Yuri Gagarin.
Yeah, what a great name.
Yeah, actually, here's a question for you as well.
Okay.
So we know American space explorers are called astronauts.
Yeah.
Chinese space explorers are called taikonauts. Do you know what a Russian space explorer is called?
Raikonauts?
Nope.
Okay, tell me. I don't know.
Cosmonaut.
Cosmonaut. I like that.
So Yuri Gagarin was the first man in space, and he was a cosmonaut.
Oh, very cool.
Very cool indeed.
Let's head to the 13th of April, 1997. Tiger Woods wins his first major. Of course, the youngest person to ever win a major at the age of 21. You want to know
A major
something?
court case or a major...
No, it was a major golf tournament, of course. For those that don't know, Tiger Woods, of course, played golf. Something interesting about... he also played women.
I only know him from the Gillette commercials, yeah.
His real name is Eldrick.
Oh, what? I
Eldrick
thought his
Woods.
name was actually Tiger.
No, it's Eldrick Tiger Woods. Hilarious, right?
Oh, that's insane. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move along to the 14th of April, 1865. Abraham Lincoln, after leading the Union through the Civil War,
What a man.
sits down to watch a nice little play.
What happens?
Bang, bang.
He's shot.
Shot. John Wilkes Booth.
Oh, why? Happens to the best of them. And I guess the worst as well.
Yeah, some
Happens
pretty
to a
bad
lot
people
of
have been assassinated as well. But, yeah, so Lincoln is assassinated. Everyone's very sad. And then, of course, the guy that we spoke about in, I think it was episode 2 or 3, Andrew Johnson, comes to
He
power.
Gets impeached.
He got impeached.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
15th of April, 1912. It won a lot of Oscars in 1997. That's
yeah?
right. Titanic.
Oh.
RMS Titanic hits the iceberg. Now, if you wanted to have a party, the Titanic was the place to go. Before
really?
it sunk, had 20,000 bottles of beer, 1,500 bottles of wine, 8,000 cigars, all for the first-class passengers.
What?
And actually, on that day, it didn't actually... It hit the iceberg, but it didn't sink until the day after.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's been documented that a man called Jack Dawson, as he was about to die, says, "Never let go." Just kidding. That was from James Cameron's 1997 Titanic.
You got me.
Got you. Snookered.
Okay, so let's move on to our last fast fact for the week. 16th of April, 1943.
This is a good one.
The hallucinogenic effects of LSD are discovered.
So what I'm confused about is what were people doing when they were taking LSD before? They were like...
Well, no,
I don't understand. What
Well,
was happening?
they weren't. Do you know the story?
No, tell me.
Okay, so there was this German chemist, right?
Yeah.
I've forgotten his name. I believe it's Alfred or something like that.
Hitchcock, fine.
Anyway, so he's busy working in his lab, and he gets a bit of it on his hand.
I do know the
It's
story.
synthesized. It's not a real drug.
Yeah.
Or rather, it's not naturally occurring. Anyway, so then he's riding his bicycle home. And he's like, whoa. He's having a time.
That tree
He
is amazing.
having a time. And then he starts looking at the clinical uses for it. And then the government in the US decides to make it a Class A narcotic. And then you go to jail forever if you're found with it. So, yeah.
Crazy. I mean, imagine that. What a good day for him. Like riding his bike in 1943. Hello, world.
Hello, world.
This is me.
This is me. This reminds me of a similar story. Like, you know the product Febreze? You know that?
Yeah.
There's a very similar one where this lab technician, he was a rampant smoker. He was a bad smoker, and he's working on this chemical, and he spills it all over him, and he comes home, and his wife is like, "Whoa, have you stopped smoking?" and he's like, "No," and it turns out that it was just the smell cleaning agent in Febreze, and he's like, "Oh my god!"
If you know any crazy inventions that have happened exactly like this, a bit of LSD in your hand,
a little bit of an accident.
Let us know on our Facebook page, Harry and Nash. But Nash, that's the end of Fast Facts. That's how it works. We go through quick facts that happen in this week. Only 6 of them. That's all you need. It's quick enough. Bang, 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 bang.
Done.
It's great.
Ladies and gents, in case you missed it, that was Fast Facts.
I love it.
It's been a huge week in history from the 10th to the 16th of April. Harry, you covered the Apollo 13 mission. We spoke to Mike Dinn. And, man, that was a hell of a story.
It was crazy. You can hear the full interview on our SoundCloud before you were born. And Nash, of course, you spoke about Apple II and a very, very big question.
Whether or not technology guides society or society guides the evolution of technology.
Well, it's been a great episode. I've enjoyed it. Let's come back next week with some more
From a time before you were born.